gentlemen, these are the top 5 best cars of 2022. In 5th place, we have the Lotus Emira. This is a car that I was super excited to review because I'm actually on the wait list for one. I had a deposit since last December of 2021, and after watching some reviews, I was a little bit concerned, but in the flesh, actually driving it, it was such a joy. Amazing steering, as Lotuses always do. The Toyota supercharged V6 is seemingly unchanged from the Evora, and it's more or less an Evora with a better interior and a few minor changes here and there. And the styling is, I'm convinced it's the best looking car under 100 grand by far. More recently, seeing Harry from Harry's Garage driving and enjoying his on his several day road trip has me even more excited to do something similar when I get mine. I'll be getting mine with the sports suspension, not the touring suspension, because when I drove the sports suspension, I thought it was definitely compliant enough, and I prefer my cars a little bit more stiffly sprung. Now, all of these scores for the top 5 cars are based on the Jubbal Cars Driving Index, and that spreadsheet you can find linked below this video or linked below any other car review video. We look at things like the handling, the engine, the transmission, the steering feel, and the congruence. The congruence is essentially how well the car's driving dynamics and ethos align throughout the branding, styling, and just positioning of that vehicle. Next up, in number 4, the 981 Boxster GTS. Now, this car was with the PDK 7-speed, and I generally don't like automatic transmission vehicles because I definitely prefer rowing my own gears. However, driving this on the twisties out in Livermore, although I would have preferred a manual, I still thoroughly enjoyed driving this car because that PDK is seamless. It's the best automatic transmission that I have driven. You know, the Porsche PDKs are just really high up there. And the way it handled was very neutral and inspires confidence. And I think a large part of driving enjoyment is when you're able to push a car close to its limit comfortably, right? Because if a car is quick to bite and unpredictable as you approach the limit, then you're never able to safely do so or comfortably do so, especially when you're driving on public roads. The sound of the 981 is also vastly superior than the 718, unless you get the 718 GTS 4.0 or GT4. Oh, baby. And comparing the Porsche products, whether the Boxster or the Cayman, to the Lotus Emira, you begin to see how they address different parts of the market. Whereas the Porsche is a little bit more polished and refined and is trying to be more things to more people, Lotus's approach is a little bit more raw, a little bit more bespoke feeling, and you're gonna lack some of that polish, some of the refinement, but the advantage of that is you have a much more raw and engaging driving experience. It should also be stated that these are the best cars that I got to drive this year, not necessarily the best cars that came out this year, obviously. Number 3 is the 981 GT4, and the reason it's the 981 and not the 718 is because the 718 I drove was at the dealership, it was PDK, and the 981 GT4 I drove was in the mountains and it was stick shift. So that car was, I mean, I know it sounds super cliche and everyone says this, but it was telepathic and it was like a surgical scalpel. It was just so precise, so sharp, so just competent, right? And some people actually critique the Caymans because they are a little bit boring given the balance, the neutrality, how well behaved they generally are. And I can understand that. I like power oversteer quite a bit. And the Cayman GT4, especially on public roads, you're not really doing that much. But up until the GT4 RS was released, this was peak pinnacle Cayman. What Porsche could do with the Cayman platform, which we all know is superior than the rear engine 911. And if you don't believe me, then please tell me why the Cup car, the RSR, is mid-engine, even though that's a 2011. Number 2 is an AP2 S2000, but this one is far from stock. This is tuned by Eric, and holy cow, the way this thing handles. So first of all, this guy is a literal rocket scientist. He's an aerospace engineer, so he's a very sharp and smart guy and knows what he's doing when it comes to tuning and just overall engineering of cars. And what he was able to do with his track prepped S2000, it was so enjoyable to drive on the canyons. The way that it rotated using the throttle, you could get, I had never driven a car where it was so easy to get the car into that perfect rotation. Rotation is where you're just on the edge of oversteer, where you're technically oversteering ever so slightly without the need for countersteer, right? And that's actually where you are fastest. That's the limit of grip. And if you're able to achieve and maintain that razor's edge, that's where you're fastest. And I think it's the most enjoyable place to be as well. Now, getting to that place is more or less challenging in different cars, but the way he has tuned his, it was just so sublime. And the way it was handling that bumpy road, suspension was very compliant, even though it was a track setup. Really, really well done. Obviously, he dumped a lot of money into that car, but the other thing that really shocked me was how good the steering was, because every S2000 I've ever driven, the biggest complaint I have is the steering feedback. And the sharpness, the immediacy of the turn-in, and the feedback on this was phenomenal. And I think he did some spherical bushings as well as changed some suspension geometry. I believe it was the caster primarily that influenced the feedback, is what he told me. And that was just such a joy to drive. Such a joy. Obviously, it was hardtop, track vehicle, but that didn't detract too much from the driving experience. I would have preferred it, open top, of course. And number 1, the 2007 Porsche 911 GT3. That's the 997.2 generation. Holy cow, what a car. Now, I drove the 996 GT3 very recently, and the two cars are so different. The 997 I vastly prefer. It still has a noticeable degree of understeer on throttle input, mid-corner, and that's just a downside of the rear engine platform. It's very noticeable on the 996, a little bit less so on the 997. But that 997, the Metzger engine, the transmission, the hydraulic steering rack of the Porsche, it was sublime. We were also driving it in Los Angeles, and Jimmy, the owner of that car and many other cars I've reviewed on the channel, has immaculate taste with cars, as you can see. And he also lives close to these gorgeous driving roads. When it comes to the driving experience, we obviously focus on the vehicle, but where you drive, it also has a very large impact of your impression and how memorable the experience is. And I love that car, and I wonder how much that amazing road influenced my overall perception and love of that car. Whoa, slippery. Very cold, very slippery right now. So those are the top 5 cars based on the points, and you can see the full point breakdown again on that spreadsheet. Now, I also want to cover the 5 most memorable cars. These are not based on any score, any objective metric. These are just based on what was most memorable to me this year. Number 1 is the Ford Mustang Ecoboost. This is the first car I ever reviewed on the channel, and right after my stick shift, how to drive stick shift learning tutorial, which was in my old FRS. And this Ecoboost, it was a satire, kind of sarcastic review driving the LA mountains. And that video, I believe, is still my number 1, or maybe it's like number 2 now. I think it was overtaken by some GR86 videos. But the way that video crushed, I was just shocked. I thought that it was going to be the worst performing video because it is the least enthusiast relevant car, one of the least enthusiast relevant cars on this channel, but I had fun with it. I didn't take that review too seriously. Number 2 is the Lotus Elise. In terms of scoring, it wasn't in the top 5, but in terms of driving enjoyment and engagement, holy shitballs, that was insane. That was an otherworldly experience. I love lightweight cars with high revving engines and beautiful steering, and that car just ticked all the boxes for me. I was able to push it so hard on those windy roads, and I get to that point where I just laugh a lot and say, oh my God, this is so good. This thing is just so good, man. Oh my God. Oh, yes. And can't say that much more. I got to that point several times while driving the Lotus Elise, which is a reflection of just how engaging and, I mean, yeah, engaging that driving experience was. It was just everything I look for in driving. And would I own one? Probably. The thing that's keeping me from it is, number one, it very much lacks practicality, and number two, I do care about safety. And because the car is so small and so light, and because especially here in Vegas we have such insanely bad drivers, I'm just concerned for my safety. Number three was driving the two bone stock AP1 and AP2 S2000s in SoCal. These are, again, Jimmy's. And again, the road, the experience, the high revving nature, and I think in stock form the AP1 is substantially more enjoyable to drive. Part of that is the 1000 RPM higher redline. Part of that is the faster ratio steering and the sharper and less forgiving handling, which I think makes it more razor edge and more engaging to drive. But really up there, Jimmy is an amazing guy, and kudos to him for letting me review his amazing collection. Number four is the 996.2 GT3, and the reason this is most memorable is because I was, how do I say this? I was a little bit underwhelmed and disappointed. I think that it's a very difficult car to drive. The understeer on throttle input mid-corner is extremely prominent, holy crap, and it's one of those cars that can snap oversteer on you. Not an easy car to drive. The manual transmission is kind of sloppy, especially for a GT3. The pedal placement is far from ideal. The steering was better than the other 996s that I've driven. I've driven two other 996s this year, but it wasn't nearly as good as the 997 steering. It wasn't as tight, and it felt strangely light with the steering feedback. Not a very easy car to drive hard by any means. And number five was actually the first generation NSX. I drove Fenton's son's NSX, and I think the NSX has been put on a pedestal for a lot of people, myself included. And driving it, it felt much more GT than actual sports car. And I think part of that is the base configuration is pretty soft. The suspension isn't the most, the handling overall is just not the most sporty, right? Very slow steering rack. I do like that it's a manual rack, but I hear that by trying a Type R, or rather an NSX that is modified to be closer to a Type R, that I would probably enjoy the driving experience much more. So I am looking forward to trying that at some point. And before we wrap up, I just have some final thoughts. First of all, I want to say big thank you to a few people. Number one is you guys, the viewers. You guys make this possible. This is my third YouTube channel, and it's the smallest one by far, by multiple orders of magnitude, but it's the one that I'm most excited to make because I get to explore my passion, my longest, largest, most obsessive passion from when I was 3 years old. I want to also thank Fenton's son from the Zygreen channel. He has been literally so insanely generous, so helpful. He's helped me get most of the cars that I've reviewed on this channel. He's provided me a lot of insight and tips and feedback on my own reviews. He's been very supportive and just overall a fantastic friend. Can't thank him enough. If you guys haven't already checked out his channel, please do so. He is a phenomenal reviewer, fantastic driver, and just a great friend overall. And overall, this experience, now it's the end of 2022, it's been such a humbling experience, guys. This is now my third YouTube channel, right? I started Med School Insiders in October of 2016. 0 subs, 0 audience, no Instagram, no newsletter, no nothing. Started literally from scratch. Grew that channel to 100,000 subscribers in 5 months. Grew that channel to 200,000 subscribers in 11 months. With my second channel, Cayman Jubbal MD, which I started at the end of 2017, it took me, I'm guessing, like 2-ish years to hit 100K. I'm not sure the exact time frame there. And now we're around 200K 4 or 5 years later. This channel has been so humbling because it's now been close to a year. I started this channel, I think in, was it February or March? It's now December. So around 9 months, 9-10 months, something like that. And we're at 1.6K subs. So if you are one of those subscribers, I want to say thank you for joining me on this journey. it's overall been such a humbling experience because YouTube is tough, especially the car review space. It is showing me that I need to up my car review game, right? I can't give as much time and attention to this channel. I gotta do POV. I can't get fancy with the different camera angles and all that stuff because I need to focus on my other businesses and my other channels. But what it has pointed out to me and has highlighted is that reviewing cars is a skill, and I'm studying great reviewers out there, people like Chris Harris, Jason Camisa. What can I learn from them? What can I extrapolate and integrate into my own reviews to make for better, more engaging videos and a better viewing experience for you guys? So if you guys have any suggestions or tips, constructive criticism, I'm always super appreciative of that. And again, big thank you to the viewers and the subscribers for making this whole thing possible. That's it, my friends. Thank you all so much for watching. Much love. Hope you have a happy new year, and I'll see you guys in the next one.